Mira stared hungrily at Zachary's chiseled jaw, wanting nothing more than to run her tongue along his sweaty skin and taste a real man for the first time in her life. She had been so loveless and lonely, until she saw the human. "Get your ass to the Galactic Council chambers now, Zachary," the holographic message from the council blared, jolting Zachary out of a deep sleep. "We don't care that Vulcans disgust you. A crazy Vulcan bitch scientist named Mira stole plans that will let the Dominion remotely disable our weapons and slaughter us. We need you to hunt her down and get those plans back." "How much?" Zachary grunted, pulling on a shirt to cover his muscular, scarred chest. The promise of credits always woke him up quickly. 25,000 credits in your account now. 25,000 more when you get back with the plans and Mira, dead or alive. 50,000 now, or I'm going back to sleep." "Fine, done," the council voice snapped as Zachary's credit chit beeped with the funds transfer. "Ambassador Sarek will brief you. Move." Zachary stomped into the council chambers 15 minutes later, glaring at the pale, calm Vulcan waiting for him. "The plans will let the Dominion neutralize our fleets and invade our worlds," Sarek said, getting straight to business. "Mira has fled to Kyr. The volcanic gases will burn out Vulcan lungs in minutes, but a human in a rebreather can survive. You are the only one who can get close enough to capture her and recover the plans. She must be taken alive." "I'll get it done," Zachary growled. "But if she so much as blinks funny, I'm putting a plasma bolt through her skull. Galaxy has enough Vulcan scientists." Sarek raised an eyebrow. "Her genius is an asset we cannot afford to lose. Lethal force is forbidden. Depart for Kyr immediately. We only have 6 days before she sells the plans to the Dominion. All sapient life in the galaxy will be enslaved or exterminated if you fail." Yeah, what else is new?" Zachary pulled on his rebreather helmet and checked his blaster. "One bitchy Vulcan coming up." Striding to his ship, Zachary plotted a course for the noxious hell of Kyr. Its volcanic tunnels and toxic fumes should have kept Mira out, but the stupid woman had found a way in. Getting her out would be a risk. A ghost of a smile crossed Zachary's face. Risks made things fun. Zachary's ship touched down on the black volcanic plain, kicking up clouds of obsidian dust. He pulled on his rebreather helmet, the filters already straining against the toxic fumes that shrouded Kyr's surface. Slinging his plasma rifle over his shoulder, he checked the charge. 100%. Enough to blast through anything the traitorous Vulcan bitch had set up as a defense. His stun baton hung at his hip, for when he needed to take her down without killing her. Stupid council and their don't kill the valuable scientist bullshit, dead or alive, worked just fine for him. He patted the restraints on his belt, eager to lock the damn Vulcan in them. The containment field generator for the data drive clicked against his thigh armor as he moved, a constant reminder of his mission. The landscape was just as shitty as Sarek had described. Endless black plains broken by jagged cliffs of volcanic glass, the scene periodically lit by hellish red lava flares that illuminated the desolation. Zachary consulted his wrist computer, getting a lock on the location the council had tracked Mira to, a towering rock formation about 2 clicks northeast. Zachary set off at a steady pace, the enhanced servos of his armor easily handling the uneven terrain. As he approached the base of the rock formation, his eyes narrowed. There, a glint of metal that didn't belong. He crouched down, scanning it with his helmet's optics. An airlock door, cleverly disguised to blend in with the volcanic rock. His computer pinged, indicating a maze of tunnels stretching out beyond the door, with a large chamber deep in the heart of the rock. Had to be Mira's lab. Leaning out from behind the boulder, Zachary sighted down his rifle's scope and adjusted the frequency to Vulcan anti-armor. The turret swiveled, locking onto him, but before it could fire again, Zachary pulled the trigger. A lance of blue-white plasma leapt from his rifle's barrel and impacted the turret dead center. It exploded in a shower of molten metal, reduced to slag. Zachary scanned the area, looking for more turrets or other defenses, but detected nothing. Mira must have only expected Vulcans to come after her, not a human. Her mistake. He approached the airlock door again and knelt beside the control panel. His wrist computer interfaced with it, and after a few moments of hacking he heard the satisfying clunk of the locks disengaging. Standing, he readied his rifle and pulled the door open, quickly stepping inside and sealing it shut behind him. The tunnels were dim, lit only by the eerie red glow of the lava flares filtering in through small vents in the black rock. Zachary switched his rifle to infrared and activated the scope, the tunnel ahead lighting up in shades of heat-generated orange and red. Mira had to know he was here now after he'd blown her turret, so stealth was pointless. Speed was key. He set off down the tunnel at a fast clip, the winding path descending deeper into the rock. The heat increased as he went lower, and he felt sweat trickling down his neck under his helmet. His rebreather strained to filter out the toxic volcanic gases seeping in through the vents. Twice more concealed turrets popped out and fired on him, but Zachary dispatched them with quick shots from his rifle. A sentry drone swooped out from a hidden alcove, alarms blaring, but he smashed it to the ground with a swing of his stun baton, then put a plasma bolt through its sparking remains. After trekking through the claustrophobic winding tunnels for over an hour, Zachary finally reached a reinforced durasteel door, warning signs plastered across it in Vulcan script: biohazard, radiation, authorized personnel only. His wrist computer identified a DNA reader on the lock, keyed to Mira's biometrics. Zachary cursed. No way he was hacking that. He knelt and unclipped a breaching charge from his belt. Setting it on the door, right over the locking mechanism, he primed the detonator and took position to the side of the door. He thumbed the detonator trigger. The shaped charge exploded inward with a thunderous boom, blasting the reinforced door into the room beyond. Alarms shrieked, a discordant wail that echoed through the tunnels. So much for stealth. Zachary charged through the smoking, twisted remains of the door, storming into the lab with his rifle up and ready. The damn Vulcan had to be in here. Time to end this. Zachary burst into the lab with his rifle raised, his eyes sweeping the room for any threats. He immediately spotted Mira hunched over a terminal, her fingers flying over the keys as she transferred files to a data drive. At the sound of his entrance, Mira spun around, snatching a plasma pistol off the console. She fired wildly in Zachary's direction, her shots going wide. Zachary dodged the poorly aimed bolts with ease and returned fire, his rifle bucking in his hands. He deliberately aimed just to the right of Mira, hitting the terminal instead of her. The plasma bolt slammed into the computer console, instantly reducing it to a twisted, sparking wreck. Mira yelped and reflexively dropped her pistol, throwing her arms up to shield her face from the spray of flaming debris. Seizing his chance, Zachary charged forward and tackled Mira to the ground. She struggled fiercely, but Zachary quickly overpowered her and snapped restraints around her wrists. Ignoring her ranting, Zachary's gaze landed on the data drive lying near the smoking remains of the console. He snatched it up and secured it in a containment field on his belt. Then he hauled Mira to her feet and began dragging her towards the lab's exit. Suddenly, a violent tremor rocked the entire complex. Zachary stumbled and slammed into a wall, a string of curses flying from his mouth. Mira's eyes went wide with fear. Zachary glared at her, his grip on her arm tightening painfully. "If you're lying—" Another tremor, even stronger than the first, cut him off. Warning lights flashed and alarms blared. Spitting out a vicious oath, Zachary wrenched Mira forward and took off running, hustling her out of the lab and back into the tunnels. They raced through the shaking, groaning passages, the lights flickering ominously overhead. Mira stumbled, slowing them down, and Zachary ruthlessly hauled her back to her feet, half dragging, half carrying her along. Rounding a bend, they skidded to an abrupt halt. The tunnel ahead had collapsed, tons of rock and rubble blocking their path. Zachary swore viciously. Having no choice but to trust her, Zachary doubled back and followed Mira's directions. They sprinted through the increasingly unstable tunnels, the complex shaking itself apart around them. Just as they reached the airlock door, a deafening explosion tore through the tunnel system behind them. A massive fireball erupted from the passages, rapidly consuming everything in its path as it raced towards them. Zachary slammed his fist on the airlock controls, the door sealing shut a split second, before the roaring inferno engulfed it. The thick Vulcan alloy held back the flames, but the temperature inside the airlock skyrocketed. Zachary and Mira sagged against opposite walls, gasping for air like fish out of water. Sweat poured down their faces in rivers. Mira shot Zachary a look of frustrated respect between heaving breaths. "I underestimated you, human." Zachary paid her no attention. He tapped commands into his suit computer, remotely triggering his ship's autopilot. Seconds later, the ship descended into view, hovering outside the airlock. After a rushed pressure equalization, Zachary wrenched open the outer door and shoved Mira through. They half ran, half fell onto the waiting entry ramp. The instant their feet hit the ramp, the ground convulsed and ruptured. Magma burst from the crack in a searing geyser. Zachary sprinted for the cockpit, his hands a blur over the launch controls. The ship lurched skyward, the lava plume sizzling against its shields. They punched through the noxious atmosphere, the black sky giving way to stars, but Mira was nowhere to be seen. Zachary raced to the hold. He found Mira crouched over the data drive's containment field, muttering furiously as she tried to hack it. Without a word, Zachary whipped out his stun baton and fired. Mira crumpled to the deck, out cold. Zachary hauled her limp form into a cell and divested her of tools, then returned to the cockpit. He laid in a course for the nearest Galactic Council outpost, intending to hand Mira and the data drive over to their custody. A hail from Sarek interrupted his thoughts. Zachary gave a clipped report, and Sarek's normally stoic face showed naked relief. The Vulcan revealed that Mira's stolen plans were for a genocidal bioweapon, not an anti-ship weapon. Zachary, mentally reeling, simply nodded and closed the channel. As the stars streaked by, he pondered what could have driven Mira to such desperate, destructive lengths. Zachary's hands flew over the controls as the proximity alarms shrieked, the Dominion frigate looming ever closer on the sensors. He swore under his breath, realizing Mira must have gotten a distress signal out before he'd captured her. He pushed the throttle to the stops, the engines howling as they strained to outpace the pursuing ship. But the frigate's powerful drives ate up the distance between them with alarming speed. Left with no choice, Zachary wrenched the ship out of warp, the stars snapping back into pinpoints as he spun the vessel about to face their attacker. The frigate dropped to sublight speeds, its menacing bulk filling the view screen. "Surrender the Vulcan and the data drive," a harsh voice crackled over the comm, "or be destroyed." Zachary's lip curled. His fingers danced across the weapons controls, then jabbed the firing key. A spread of brilliant blue plasma torpedoes leapt from the ship's tubes, racing towards the frigate. The Dominion ship's shields flared, absorbing the torpedo's fury. It returned fire instantly, disruptor beams sizzling through space. Zachary sent his ship into a wild series of evasive maneuvers, the smaller vessel jinking and spinning. Disruptor blasts scorched past, barely missing. The ship shuddered as a disruptor beam clipped the shields. Energy levels plummeted. They couldn't take much more of this. Zachary wrenched the control stick, sending the ship into a stomach-churning dive towards a dense field of tumbling asteroids. Maybe he could lose the frigate in that mess. But the Dominion ship clung to their tail, its heavier shields shrugging off impacts with the space rocks that sent Zachary's ship reeling. Alarms wailed as the shields dropped to critical levels under the barrage of asteroids and disruptor fire. A disruptor beam sliced into the hull, atmosphere howling from the breach. Emergency force fields slammed into place, but the damage reports scrolling across Zachary's screens were grim. The beam had torn open the holding cell. Zachary's eyes fixed on a looming asteroid dead ahead, a massive rock with a deep crater. A desperate plan formed. He redlined the straining engines and aimed straight for the crater. At the last possible instant, he wrenched back on the controls. The ship screamed along the crater's inner surface, missing the jagged rock by meters. Behind them, the Dominion frigate tried to match the maneuver, but its greater mass worked against it. The ship ploughed into the crater wall with a blinding flash, a new sun blossoming into brief, violent life. Zachary wrestled the bucking, shuddering ship out of the asteroid field, his jaw clenched against the G-forces. The hull groaned, the vessel scorched and pitted by its ordeal, but still in one piece. Heart pounding, Zachary leapt from the pilot's seat and raced back to the holding cells, dreading what he'd find. The breach yawned before him, a jagged tear in the bulkhead. But beyond it, an emergency force field glowed, and on the other side, Mira lay still. Zachary muscled the warped cell door open and rushed to her side. She was unconscious, a trickle of green blood at her temple, but alive. She must have gotten the force field up herself. Clever Vulcan. As Zachary checked her vitals, a reluctant respect formed. She was brilliant, resourceful, a survivor. In another life, they might have been a hell of a team. Zachary stood in the cockpit, sweat beading his brow as he surveyed the damage readout scrolling across the screens. The hull breach was sealed, but the engines were shot, limiting them to a crawl. Worse, long-range comms were fried. No calling for help. He pulled up a star map, searching for the closest friendly port, then swore. Nothing in range except Elora, a Dominion world. But their shipyards could patch up his limping vessel. Zachary's jaw clenched. Risky as hell, but no choice. He laid in a course, aiming for a remote canyon outside Elora's capital to set down, praying they weren't detected. Rummaging in the hold, he pulled out a nondescript grey cloak and a wide-brimmed hat. He tucked a hold-out blaster under the cloak and a wicked knife into his boot. Zachary stepped off the ship into Elora's scorching heat, the city's spires shimmering in the distance. He flipped up his collar and started hiking. An hour later, he slipped into the city's teeming streets, just another cloaked figure amongst the crowd. Zachary wove through the throngs, following directions on his comm to a dingy shop in the merchant quarter. The shop's interior was dim and cluttered, crammed with parts from 100 worlds. A three-eyed Eleron slouched behind the counter, eyeing Zachary warily. "Need a Corellian hyperdrive motivator, Series 800, plus these," Zachary said brusquely, showing a list on his comm, fast and quiet. The Eleran named a price with a smirk. Zachary haggled hard, not budging. Finally, the merchant threw up two of his hands. "Fine, fine, but untraceable creds only." Zachary passed over a credit chip. The Eloran scanned it, then nodded, and started piling parts on the counter. Suddenly, the door chime jangled. 4 Dominion soldiers in black armor strode in, disruptors raised. "Seen this, Vulcan?" the leader barked, projecting a hollow of Mira. Zachary pulled his hat low and backed towards the rear of the shop, tucking parts into his cloak. His heart hammered as the soldiers swept the aisles. Just as they turned towards him, a crash sounded from the front. Shouts erupted. A street urchin had tried to grab the credit chip, knocking over a display. In the chaos, Zachary bolted out the back door. He raced down the alley, servos whining. At every turn he expected a squad waiting, but the alleys remained clear. Panting, Zachary reached the city outskirts and plunged into the red desert. The sun scorched overhead as he hiked back to the ship, a nervous hand on his blaster. But he reached the canyon without incident. Zachary relaxed fractionally as he trudged up the ship's ramp. Then he saw the holding cell door, ripped open, the new lock a twisted ruin on the floor. Zachary dropped the parts and drew his gun in one smooth motion, sweeping the corridors. Nothing. Heart in his throat, he crept towards the cockpit. Mira stood at the controls, hands raised as Zachary aimed at her head, but instead of defiance in her eyes, he saw calm calculation. "I have a proposal," she said evenly. "I'll help repair the ship and evade the Dominion. In return, you let me go and give me a cut of your fee." Zachary barked a disbelieving laugh. "Why the hell should I trust you?" Mira's lips quirked. "You need my help. I need to get off this planet. It's only logical." Zachary's finger tightened on the trigger, then paused as sirens started up in the city behind them. A harsh voice crackled over the shipyard speakers. "Attention! Dominion fugitive and accomplice believed in the area. All citizens must comply with search." Zachary ground his teeth, but the sound of patrol ships launching decided him. "Fine," he bit out, "but if you even think of double-crossing me, I'll space you myself." Mira inclined her head. "Understood. Now I suggest we begin repairs immediately." Zachary eyed Mira warily, his grip tight on his blaster. Every instinct screamed not to trust the Vulcan, but desperation outweighed suspicion. "Fine," he ground out, holstering his gun. "But one wrong move, and I'll finish what the Dominion started." Mira nodded curtly, already moving to the damaged engines. Logical. They worked in tense silence, Zachary's hands deftly rewiring circuits, as Mira repaired the hyperdrive motivator. Despite himself, Zachary found his gaze drawn to Mira's deft movements, her slender fingers working with a surety and skill that spoke of deep knowledge. "Hyperdrive efficiency is up to 87%, Mira reported, her voice flat, adequate for a jump to council space. Zachary grunted acknowledgement, shoving aside a flicker of admiration. Damn Vulcan was full of surprises. Suddenly proximity alarms blared, red lights flashing. Zachary lunged for the sensors. Shit, Dominion patrol, landing 2 clicks out. They'll be on us in minutes. "You what?" Zachary snarled, slamming Mira against the bulkhead. Rage boiled in his veins. "You fucking idiot! You've killed us both!" Outside, the whine of a plasma cannon powering up split the air. Zachary shoved Mira aside, sprinting for the cockpit. He threw himself into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls. The engines coughed, sputtered, then roared to life, rattling the ship. Plasma bolts hammered the hull as Zachary wrenched back on the stick, the ship lurching skyward. The Dominion soldiers poured fire after them, alarms screaming as the shields strained. Zachary swore viciously, fighting the shuddering stick. A quick glance showed the patrol ship lifting off, moving to pursue. They'd never outrun it, not with the engines barely holding together. Suddenly the ship's rear turret whirred to life, lancing blasts of return fire at the soldiers. Zachary risked a look back to see Mira crouched at the turret controls, her face set as she fired again and again. The Dominion soldiers scattered, their fire slackening. The patrol ship lurched as Mira scored a hit on its engines. Seizing the opening, Zachary punched the hyperdrive, praying to any gods listening. The stars stretched, and they shot into the blurred safety of warp. Heavy footsteps sounded behind him. He surged up, whirling to face Mira, his blaster leaping into his hand. "You nearly got us killed, you traitorous bitch! I should space you right now!" Mira raised her hands, her face ashen. "Zachary, please, I wasn't thinking. The Dominion, they have my sister." "What the hell are you talking about?" Zachary snarled, the blaster not wavering. "They took her," Mira burst out, her voice cracking. "They're holding her hostage. They said they'd torture her, kill her if I didn't get them the bioweapon plans." A sob shook her. "I thought I had no choice. It was her life or trillions of others. What could I do?" She crumpled, tears streaking her face. I'm so sorry. I was trying to save her. But I betrayed everything. I betrayed you." Zachary stared at her, his finger tense on the trigger. Mira's shoulders shook as she wept, raw anguish pouring out of her. Unbidden, an image rose in his mind. A pigtailed little girl laughing as he chased her through golden fields. His sister, dead these 15 years, killed by Dominion bombs. He'd been helpless then, a boy unable to save what mattered most. The blaster wavered, then dropped. He holstered it slowly, the rage draining away, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. I understand," he said hoarsely. "Sometimes there are no good choices, only ones that let you live with yourself." Mira raised her head, her eyes searching his face. "I have to save her, Zachary," her voice firmed. "Whatever it takes. Will you help me?" Zachary met her gaze, feeling like he stood on a precipice. The Council's mission warred with the pleading of his oft-buried conscience. At last he held out a hand. "All right, Mira, I'll help you get your sister." Mira clasped his hand, her grip strong. A glimmer of hope shone through the tears. Zachary just nodded. He turned to the controls, hands already dancing over the console, plotting a new course. Somewhere ahead a little girl waited in the dark, praying for rescue. And he'd be damned if he failed another sister. As the ship careened through the swirling vortex of warp space, the stars streaking by in blurred lines, Zachary made a decision. With a deep breath, he opened a secure channel to Sarek. Mira's eyes widened. "Zachary, no, you can't tell him about my sister. The council will think I'm compromised, that I can't be trusted." Zachary held up a hand. "Mira, we have to. It's the only way to save her." He turned to the view screen as Sarek's stern visage appeared. "Zachary, I trust you have good reason for this unscheduled contact." Zachary nodded. "I do, sir. It's about Mira, the Dominion. They have her sister. They forced her to steal the bioweapon plans by threatening to kill her if she didn't comply." Sarek's eyebrow arched. "I see, this complicates matters." "Sir, I know it's a lot to ask, but we need the Council's help. A rescue mission to save Mira's sister while we complete the delivery of the plans, and Mira to Council custody." Sarek was silent for a long moment. Finally he nodded. "Very well, I will dispatch a covert team immediately. They will extract Mira's sister and bring her to safety. In the meantime, you must complete your mission. The bioweapon plans are your top priority." "Understood, sir, thank you." Zachary ended the transmission and turned to Mira. Zachary placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know what it's like to lose a sister. I couldn't let that happen to you." In that moment, a connection sparked between them, an understanding born of shared pain and newfound trust. Mira's hand came up to cover Zachary's, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. Suddenly the ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring. They were ripped out of warp, the stars snapping back into pinpoints as the engines sputtered and died. Zachary raced to the controls, his hands flying over the console. "Shit, the repairs didn't hold, we're dead in the water." Mira paled as the scanners lit up with multiple contacts. "Zachary, Dominion warships heading straight for us. They must have tracked the beacon I planted." Zachary slammed a fist on the console. "Damn it, we can't outrun them, not like this." He turned to Mira. "Help me get the weapons and shields back online. It's our only chance." They worked furiously, rerouting power, coaxing the damaged systems back to life. The Dominion ships grew closer, their hulking forms filling the view screen. A hail crackled over the comm. "Surrender the Vulcan and the data drive, comply or be destroyed." Zachary and Mira exchanged a determined look. Zachary opened a channel, broadcasting on all Council frequencies. "This is Zachary Quinto of the Galactic Council. We are under attack by Dominion forces and request immediate assistance. Repeat, we need help now." He cut the transmission and grabbed the weapons controls. Mira slid into the seat beside him, her fingers dancing over the shield controls. The Dominion ship surrounded them, a predatory circle of bristling weapons and armored hulls. Zachary gripped the trigger, Mira's hand hovering over the shield modulator. The lead Dominion ship hailed again. "Final warning, surrender or be destroyed." Zachary's response was a volley of plasma torpedoes. The Dominion ships opened fire, disruptor beams and photon torpedoes slamming into their weakened shields. Zachary and Mira fought back with everything they had, but it was a losing battle. Just as their shields collapsed, a massive shape emerged from warp. A Council battlecruiser, its guns already blazing as it placed itself between Zachary's crippled ship and the Dominion attackers. Zachary and Mira watched in stunned amazement as the battlecruiser tore into the Dominion fleet, its superior firepower ripping through their shields like tissue paper. One by one, the Dominion ships exploded into clouds of debris, their hulls shattering under the relentless onslaught. In a matter of minutes, it was over. The battlecruiser hovered protectively over Zachary's ship, the Dominion fleet reduced to drifting wreckage. A hail came through from the battlecruiser. On the screen appeared a stern Vulcan woman in an admiral's uniform. "This is Admiral Talara of the Galactic Council. We received your distress call. Are you all right?" Zachary nodded, relief washing over him. Yes, Admiral, thank you. You saved our lives. Sarek briefed me on your mission, and he informed me of the situation with Mira's sister. I have dispatched a team to extract her. She will be brought to safety. Mira let out a choked sob, her hand finding Zachary's and squeezing tightly. Thank you, Admiral. Thank you so much. Talara inclined her head. Of course, now, I believe you have some important cargo to transfer to our custody. Zachary straightened. Yes, Admiral. Request permission to dock and complete the delivery of the bioweapon plans, and Mira. Zachary guided his ship into the battlecruiser's docking bay, the heavy thud of the docking clamps echoing through the hull. He glanced at Mira, who sat silently beside him, her face pale and drawn. Armed guards met them as they disembarked, escorting them through the ship's sterile corridors. On the bridge, Admiral Talara stood waiting, her hands clasped behind her back. Well done, she said as they approached. The bioweapon plans are secure and Mira's sister is safe. Her expression darkened. But we have a problem. Talara called up a holographic display. Our rescue team found evidence that the Dominion has already started producing the bioweapon. They're using incomplete data Mira sent them before you intervened. Mira blanched, her hands shaking. No, I didn't know they'd... We're mounting a strike to destroy their production facilities, Talara cut her off. But we need the complete data to ensure we hit every site. Mira straightened, her voice resolute despite her clear anguish. I'll help. It's my fault they have the data. I need to fix this. Zachary stepped forward. I'm in too. This mission is too important to sit out. Talara eyed them, then nodded curtly. We leave in 1 hour. Get your gear. The strike team assembled in the hangar bay, a dozen hardened soldiers in black combat armor. Zachary and Mira stood among them, checking their weapons in tense silence. As the assault shuttle streaked towards the Dominion world, Talara briefed them on the plan. Mira will hack their defenses. Zachary, you lead the team in and plant the charges. Once the fleet has visual confirmation of your sabotage, they'll commence orbital bombardment. The shuttle shuddered as it hit atmosphere, anti-aircraft fire streaking past the viewports. Zachary's grip tightened on his rifle as Mira typed frantically at a console, her brow furrowed in concentration. I'm in, she reported as the shuttle neared the drop zone. Guns and shields will go offline in 5, 4, 3... The shuttle's ramp slammed open. Go, 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 Zachary roared, leaping out into the chaos, Mira on his heels. They charged across the battle-scarred ground, the facility's defenses rippling and dying as they advanced. Dominion soldiers poured from the buildings, but the strike team cut through them, Zachary and Mira fighting side by side like a well-oiled machine. They blasted into the main production bay, a cavernous space filled with towering bioweapon tanks. Set the charges, Zachary ordered, laying down covering fire. Mira raced to the control room, fingers flying over the keys as she prepped the facility for demolition. Zachary lobbed grenades into the ranks of Dominion troops, the explosions ripping through the chamber. Mira sprinted from the control room, and a plasma bolt seared through her chest. She crumpled, blood pooling beneath her. No! Zachary charged to her side, scooping her into his arms and running for the extraction point, his heart in his throat. He made it to the shuttle just as the charges blew, the facility disappearing in a blinding fireball. Get us out of here, Zachary bellowed, cradling Mira as the shuttle leapt for the safety of space. Stay with me, he pleaded. We're almost there. Mira, Mira! Zachary's voice cracked. He held her tight as the shuttle docked, the medics rushing in too late. He stood on the bridge, still in his bloodied armor, as Talara reviewed the data chip. This is the key, she said. With this, we can end the Dominion's bioweapon program for good. Zachary barely heard her, his mind filled with Mira's final moments. The ship rocked as the fleet opened fire, the Dominion facility shattering into dust under the onslaught. In the following days, strike after strike rained down on Dominion worlds, as the information Mira provided led them to every hidden research base and production center. Dominion leaders fell to Council soldiers. The bioweapon program collapsed. The council lauded Zachary as a hero, the one who made it all possible. They offered him a command, a chance to lead the fight against the Dominion. He turned them down. All he could see was Mira's face as the light left her eyes. Months passed, the ache of Mira's loss never quite fading from Zachary's heart. He threw himself into mission after mission, striking at the Dominion wherever he could. His latest objective found him infiltrating a secret Dominion weapons depot, planting explosives among the crates of plasma rifles and photon grenades. Sweat trickled down Zachary's neck as he set the final charge, the timer glowing ominously in the dim light. Suddenly, a footstep echoed behind him. He spun, blaster drawn, and froze. Sari stepped from the shadows, her face a mask of grief and rage. Zachary's heart clenched. He'd thought her dead, buried in the ruins of the bioweapon facility. Zachary lowered his gun. "Sari, I tried to save her. I'm so sorry." Sari's eyes flashed. "Sorry isn't good enough." With a feral cry, she launched herself at Zachary, a wicked-looking dagger in her hand. Zachary barely got his blaster up in time to block her strike. They grappled, spinning through the rows of weapons crates. Sari fought like a woman possessed, her blade seeking Zachary's flesh again and again. "Sari, stop!" Zachary pleaded, dodging a slash that would have opened his throat. "This isn't what Mira would have wanted." Sari's face twisted. "Mira's dead because of you." She kicked Zachary back, sending him crashing into a stack of rifles. "I've been waiting for this, tracking you across the galaxy, and now I'll have my revenge." She advanced, dagger glinting. Zachary scrambled to his feet, backing away. "Revenge won't bring her back, Sari. Believe me, I know." Sari hesitated, something flickering in her eyes. Zachary pressed on. "I loved her too, and I'll never forgive myself for failing her, but this path, this anger, it's not the answer." For a moment Sari wavered, then her face hardened. "No, the Council, the Dominion, they all have to pay, and you'll be the first." She lunged. Zachary sidestepped, catching Sari's wrist. They struggled, knocking over crates, grenades spilling across the floor. Sari wrenched free, slashing at Zachary's face. He felt the sting of the blade across his cheek. "I've found others who see the truth," Sari panted. "Vulcans who know the Council and Dominion must be destroyed. Join us, Zachary. Fight for a galaxy freed from their control." Zachary shook his head sadly. "I can't, Sari. More violence, more death. It's not what Mira stood for. She believed in the Council, in their mission. I have to honor that." Sari's eyes flashed with manic fervor. "Then you'll die with them," she charged, dagger aimed at Zachary's heart. He snatched up a fallen rifle and fired. The plasma bolt caught Sari in the shoulder, spinning her around. Her dagger clattered away. Zachary kicked the blade aside, standing over Sari as she clutched her wound. Anguish and exhaustion etched his face. Sari spat at him, her eyes burning with hatred. "I'll never stop hunting you, never." The floor shuddered beneath them. Zachary's head snapped up, dread seizing him. The explosives, in the chaos of their fight, they must have been triggered early. The building shook, support beams groaning. Zachary reached for Sari. "We have to go, now!" Zachary hesitated, torn. The ceiling cracked above them, raining dust and debris. Time had run out. With a last anguished look at Sari, Zachary turned and ran, leaping over rubble as the depot collapsed around him. He hurled himself through the door, the roar of the explosions, and Sari's final, hate-filled scream chasing him into the night. Zachary stumbled to a halt in the shadows of a nearby alley, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Grief and guilt warred within him, the acrid taste of failure coating his tongue. Sari was gone, consumed by the same fires of vengeance that had claimed so many, and he was alone once more, the weight of the lost pressing down on his soul. Zachary closed his eyes, seeing Mira's face, her quiet strength. She had fought for a better future, even at the cost of her own life. He couldn't let that be in vain. Squaring his shoulders, Zachary melted into the city's shadows, already planning his next strike against the Dominion. The road ahead stretched long and dark, a solitary path he had no choice but to walk. The fight went on, and he with it, a human standing alone against the forces that would enslave the galaxy. Mira's memory was a fire in his heart, driving him forward, even as the ghosts of the fallen whispered at his heels. For them, for her, he would not falter. He could not. The price of freedom was a burden he would bear, no matter how heavy it grew. And though the void of space promised only cold and unending battle, Zachary would face it as he always had, one mission at a time until the day his luck ran out and the darkness claimed him at last. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.